Hello, amazing ladies in business. Welcome to the HerStory podcast. I'm your host, Kylie King, the founder of Australian Ladies in Business Initiative. And today I am so excited to be joined by the incredible Michelle Wollaston from her business, Michelle Wollaston. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Kylie. Thanks for having me on.
So let's get started with letting the listeners know what is the amazing work that you're out there doing.
So I primarily are working with women, and they do tend to be women who I call in their midlife phase, but they don't have to be, but primarily that sort of is what resonates with my people. And I really just bring to them the opportunity to have someone hold space for them while we look at what they're currently experiencing. Before we meet, I've already had a look at their energetic framework through astrology and human design and all those sort of things so that I can get a feel for what their current energy is asking of them. And then normally once we get together and have a chat, that very much mirrors their actual experience that they're going through in the present moment. And then it's really about just holding space for them, teaching them how they can lower all of that external noise that we all go through in this portion of our life so they can remember themselves and hear what they need to be doing for themselves. And I just help them implement anything that they might need from a practice perspective, such as taking time out, any sort of mindfulness practice, whatever works in with what they feel comfortable with, their daily routine, what's happening in their world, so that they can just start to hear and see intuitively where they're supposed to be going, which often happens once they have a chance to talk about it and become aware of those strategies that are available to them, and then just start consistently implementing it.
Beautiful. So you mentioned that you already use some frameworks that they might already know. So there was human design mentioned. And sorry, and astrology, did you say that
Yes.
you?
So when you
Yep.
come to me, the first thing I do is I send you a contact form, and
Yep.
I get your birth data. So I look at your natal chart, which is the blueprint of energy that you've chosen to come into this life experience with to support you. I look at your progressed moon. So a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't either until I did astrology, that we're all familiar with the 8 phases of the moon as it goes across a monthly cycle. But those same 8 phases go across our life cycle every 29 and a half years. And each phase lasts for about 3.5 years. So if you're in a phase at the moment, for example, you could be in a balsamic moon phase, which is the 3 years that happen before the new moon kicks in. And if you're trying to plant seeds and start a business or whatever it could be that you're trying to do, and you're finding that it's not working, it's not happening for you, things are falling over, I can then say, well, it's because you're not in the energy of that. You're still in the energy of the balsamic phase, which is asking you to clear the soil and prepare yourself and let go of the things that aren't serving you. You're not quite ready yet to be planting the seeds. So you have to pull yourself back. So I always look at that. And I also look at their human design, because the energy associated with your human design type is how you put yourself out to the world and how you should be energetically walking into all the spaces that you are inhabiting, whether that's your family, your workplace, your business. So I look at those, primarily those 3 energetic frameworks, which are pretty accurate and can pinpoint what the client's going through before they actually open up and we have the face-to-face.
Beautiful. So you mentioned birth data. So I'm guessing that's things like the date of birth, of course, your time of birth, and your place of birth. But time of birth can be a bit tricky for people. So I know for my time of birth, I don't speak to my mother. I couldn't get it. So I actually had to contact a hospital in a different
Yeah.
state. And they had to actually go down into their archives, they said, to find the paper that it was written on to get my birth. And that took about 6 months. So what happens if the hospital won't give it to you or you just don't know your birth time?
So usually what I do is I sort of say to people, if you have got the opportunity now to ask your biological mother when you were born, and unfortunately, depending on how old you are, that may not be something they even remember, to then go through a series of questions. So, okay, mum, do you remember whether it was early morning, mid morning, late at night. Like try to go back into the memories of what happened in that 24 hours of kind of when labour set in. Depending on when you were born and what hospital you were in, like I know with my middle child, the TV was going on the wall in the room while I was in labour. And I remember that the show that was on was Water Rats. And I know that show happened between like 7:30 and 8:30 or whatever it was. So often you can remember things that happened in the labour stage that kind of can at least pinpoint it. And it won't be as accurate as having the actual time and minutes, because that affects the house placement of the planet. But if you can at least narrow it down to it was really early in the morning, or it was kind of breakfast time, or I think it was about 3 o'clock, or I remember it was 6 o'clock because your father had just arrived from work, it allows you at least to narrow the window. And then for astrologers, we can kind of look at both aspects and sort of go, well, if it was this time, it could be this, or if it was this time. And normally you can then kind of lean into the energy just by asking the person questions to see which way they characteristically kind of flow, which can give you a better idea of, well, you kind of feel like you could be a Capricorn more than you're leaning into an Aquarius or something like that. If you don't have a biological mum that you can ask, aunties, you know, if she had a sister, that's probably the next best person who's going to remember, or a best friend. You can go to the hospital depending on how long they retain their records. But if all of that fails, we just try to do it through a guessing game of, you know, if you can't find out at all, then usually we just take it at midday on the birthday, and then we just do the best we can. It really affects your personal planet placements more. So your sun, your moon, your rising sign, Mercury, Venus, because they move quite quickly. And it can affect, as I said, the house placement. But we can normally narrow it down fairly well.
Beautiful. No, I did, and I'm not sure if it's not something that's on our birth certificate. So I know with each
No,
of
and I
my
don't know
children,
why.
I don't know either, but I know with each of my children, I said to my partner, I was like, write that time down. Like, make sure we have it, because I know how long it took me to even contact different places to get it, because it isn't on the birth certificate, but on those little cards you get when the babies are born, they write it there. So I'm unsure why it doesn't, maybe the government doesn't deem it to be important. But yeah, so that's really good to know, because I know before I knew my time, I didn't go and do these types of charts, or I didn't look into my human design, because I'm like, well, I don't know the time. So what would be the point? So I think what you've provided is a lot of good tips, and well, this is different ways we can overcome it. So if anyone can't find their birth time, they can get something similar or work it out to get the reading that they need that'll be helpful.
Yeah, then we could always offer something like the birth time is, like I said, it's really important for house placement. But at the end of the day, even if you don't know that, just the other data that you do know is enough to get a fairly broad energetic feeling for you, which we can then work with.
Beautiful. So, what got you started in looking at people's charts and then deciding to help mid-age women?
It's just one of those things that sort of evolved. So I went through my own process of sort of coming out of all of that noise probably about 12 years ago. And I was working with a mentor, and I'd always had a spiritual background. So my father was an energy healer. So I've been exposed to all of this information since I was a young teenager. So it was something that just came naturally to me. I never doubted it. I've always trusted all of those amazing things that we talk about in the spiritual world. And when I was coming back into myself, I re-established all of that practice. And I just think part of that discovery process again for me was that I actually had my own natal chart reading, which I'd never really done much more like most of us with astrology, apart from look up the weekly horoscope in the Women's Weekly or whatever we used to do. That was kind of like the deepest I'd ever got into it. And when I had my own natal chart done, I was so blown away by the accuracy of the information that I was given, that I'm like, I would really love to learn that for myself so that I can understand what my primary natal information is telling me, what my transits are doing, and really work with that rather than pushing against it. So I actually went and learned astrology. And if anybody listening in Australia would like to do that, I cannot recommend the Sydney Astrology School highly enough. Mark Lawrence is amazing. And then again, it just sort of evolved. So as I tended to move more into that mentoring space and people were coming to me and asking me for support, I just found that having those diagnostic tools available, which is what I use them for, they're diagnostic tools, it allowed me to be able to come into a client's space already fairly well informed about them energetically, which saves a lot of time. And it's sort of the most important thing because it's a free resource. You know, we're all born with this energy. We choose to come in with it. It's not something we have to endlessly pay for. Once we understand what the phases mean and what's coming for us, we just have to learn to go with it. So that's sort of how I fell into using that. And then human design, sort of, you can't do one without the other. And I haven't learnt human design as intimately as I have astrology, but I understand enough of it to be able to go, you're a projector or you're a manifesting generator, and this is how you should move through the world. And normally once you make people aware of that, they go, actually, yeah, you're right. That is how I move. And now I understand why I do things that way. So yeah, so stop trying to change that because you can't. It won't work. So I just sort of fell into it, really.
Human design is very beautiful. I went and trained to be trained under human design, and I have to say it was something that when I got my first reading, I was like, this makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
And it was one of the first readings I had where I went, yeah, now I can see why everyone thinks I'm a little bit strange with the things that I do, or why I do multiple things at multiple times and don't tend to get burnt out. So for me, it was a really good reading and it made a lot of sense. And I think it's great that you have these, as you said, diagnostic tools to then start to go, well, this is what we already know about you, and this is already what's happened. How can we work with that, rather than addressing everyone as a blank space and then trying to fit, what is it, like a one size fits all approach to people, which you can't do because everyone is so uniquely beautiful with their own, journeys.
That's right. And like even though in human design the characteristics of, for example, I'm a projector, so everybody who's a projector has a fairly streamlined set of energetic characteristics. But when you then look at that in combination with the energy of the natal chart and what's happening right now in this transit, it does change the way that you move within that energy. So the projector characteristic doesn't change, but I then lean more into the energy, so I'm not, for me, exhausting myself. And so yeah, it does really work really well, and you don't even have to really know it intimately. Once you sort of understand what your baseline is, you just have to remember to keep moving with it.
So now coming into business and offering this very unique service, what would you say has been your biggest challenge so far?
I think just trying to have people understand what an important part of our human experience understanding that is, and having people realize that you're not broken. Like, it's, when you hit midlife, which tends to sort of start energetically around 40, is when we start to feel those changes, whether they're hormonal and physiological, which are easy to track, or whether we just start to get those feelings that it's not working, I can't do this anymore, why do I feel this way? I think it's just allowing people to know that it's not a crisis. It's called a midlife crisis, and we talk about it in that way, but it's not. It's your body and your energy just bringing you into the new transition states. And once you understand that, and it's part of a becoming process, it's so much easier just to go with the flow. And I think the challenging part about that is you do have to meet everybody where they're at, and you would understand this too with what you do. Everybody comes into the things that we teach at very different levels of readiness, as well as different levels of understanding. So it's really important that we're able to break all of that down into really understandable pieces and not overload people with all of the jargon and all of the catch cries and all the cliches, but just bring it back to that human level. Just go and do this. Just take those small steps. And you only have to take those small steps to see really huge changes occur.
And it just shows you the power of language, though, doesn't it? Because we refer to it, as you mentioned, a midlife crisis. what would it like? How would you feel if it was like a midlife empowerment or a midlife, like if we named it something else, how much our opinions would change? Or like I recently had a client who mentioned she was going through a midlife crisis, or she goes, I can feel it's coming. And I'm like, you're making it sound like you're signing up for like the doom is coming, like it's
Mm.
approaching me, and there's no way to escape. And just the importance of the language with that too, if we looked at it in a different way, because as you said, it's just a transition. It's just moving from one type of energy and one type of growth into the next stage of this human experience. So it's not a crisis, it's just a movement or in a transition.
That's
It's
right, and it's about learning. You know, if we were able to be more aware, and it's not really our fault. It's just that it's not taught to us as women anymore. You know, I've spoken to women, and I've had guests on my podcast where I've discussed, you know, what did we do in this part of our life back 100, 200 years ago when we didn't have doctors going, oh, you're in menopause, and like it wasn't called that. And it was something that was honoured. You know, it was a woman's phase where you're coming out of your childbearing and you're walking into that midlife, and you're moving towards that end of your life where you're in the wisdom phase. And if you learn how to understand what the symptoms are trying to do, for example, with menopause always comes the issues of sleep, and you suddenly find that, you know, you're having the night sweats and you're not sleeping well. But that's actually your body telling you that you don't need to sleep at 9 o'clock at night. You need to sleep right now. And if that's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you just need to go and have a nap. Now, strategically, that's not always possible. But if you look at what's happening to you from that perspective of going, okay, this is my body telling me I need to do it now, not in the night time anymore, then it just allows you to work with it and take advantage of it rather than constantly pushing against it. And then it feels like a struggle when it shouldn't. Mm.
so if we flip the challenge to your biggest achievement as a business owner so far in your journey, what would be your biggest achievement?
I think getting to a point in life, like right now as we speak, I have resigned from my 9 to 5, which I have been doing 9 to 5 in some way or other for like 42 years of my life. And I've been able to bring myself to a point now where I can let that go. I understand my human experience and what I've chosen for myself, which has allowed me to move into that in a very trusting way because I just know it's going to be fine. And that's going to now allow me the space and the freedom to focus more on my business. So I say retirement in a very loose way because I don't think it will be. But being able to move out of that corporate space where you constantly got that accountability factor because someone needs you on a call or they want you to read an email, and it's a very difficult space to release yourself from when you want to have another business or something else on the side. And I know you can appreciate that as well. So I'm really excited that I've been able to bring myself energetically into a space now where I can just go, I'm going to let it go, and I'm just going to let happen what's meant to happen. And it also allows me to be much more focused on the people that I'm working with because I don't have all those competing priorities. And this is what I love to do. I love to mentor, and I love to guide, and I love to hold space. So yeah, that's my biggest achievement, is this my huge transition that's taking place as we speak.
Beautiful. That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you mentioned about menopause happening, and then sleeping can sometimes be an issue. And you know, you can't go to sleep at 2 o'clock, but then you can. You should, because your body's telling you things. Is would you say it's just another way for you to really get in touch with your body during this time? Like if there's any women going through, and I know, so Alibi's most demographic is that 35 to 50 age group. That is the most of the ladies in our beautiful community. Would you say, as a tip from all of the amazing work you do, should they listen to their body more? Is there something else they should be doing? Do they come and see you and get an energetic thing? What could help them with this, I guess, transition into the impending doom of midlife crisis? That we're not going to call it that, but because I know that there's a lot of talk about that currently in the community.
I think if I take it from a person who's come to me and say, for instance, they're 50 and they've come to me, so I've already looked at their energy. I can tell them straight away that, you know, this is what your base your energy is. At 50, you're also having your Chiron return, which is that wound that we've brought into this life with us is probably now really starting to bubble. And that's why we find so many women when they get to 50 suddenly leave their marriages, leave their long-term partnerships, leave their long-term jobs, because that Chiron return is saying to you, it's not working anymore. It's time to reflect and realign and move. So it allows women to understand that I'm not crazy, I'm not losing it. This feeling's happening for me for a reason. So that's happening. So we would talk about that. And then we would have a discussion around what's happening in your space right now. And if those feelings were coming up, it's around looking at each of the sections of your life experience. So your home, your family, your children, your parents, your workplace, all those things that we're trying to manage. And just picking one thing that you can put a little boundary in place right now to take some of that noise away and some of that expectational load off you. And you just have to start with something simple. So, you know, if you're a 50-year-old woman with teenage kids at home and no one's doing anything, you just go, that's it, I'm done. I'm not packing that dishwasher again. And if you haven't got a plate to eat off, there you go. Or I'm not doing your washing anymore. Like, it's just those little things that I think as women, we just keep taking on and taking on and taking on, even to the point where there's other people who can take it on for you. And often it's because you just haven't said anything. And especially if you're dealing with men in your world, they will say to you, well, you just had to tell me. You know, people only know what they know, and you take it all on. So they're the things that I sort of say to people. And you would think we could kind of work that for ourselves, but often we don't until someone says, have you thought about doing that? Oh, okay. And then I think because they're working with someone and there's a little bit of accountability involved, then it's kind of like, I want you to do this, and then when we meet again, you can tell me the change that it's made. So it seems overwhelming, but I think when we kind of do probably an audit of our situation and we can bring it back to those little bite-sized things that we can put in place, you realize it's not that scary, it wasn't that hard. And each time you do that and you speak your truth and you allow that to happen, it empowers you just that little bit each time. If we're talking about something like, I can feel my body fatigued in the middle of the day, but I've got to go to work, then it becomes those conversations with your workplace around, I'm going through this, what can you do for me? Can I have a flexible work arrangement? Can I work from home on some days so that and again, that's not always possible depending on what industry you're in, but 80% of the time, you can probably come to some sort of agreement where you can lessen that load or spend more time working from home and say, well, I need to have a rest up, but I can work a few more hours tonight. So I think sometimes there's so much noise that we don't have the capacity to think logically like that. And then we go, yeah, of course, I can just go and speak to someone, or I can ask my kids to do that, or I can take 20 minutes for myself every day and I'm going to go for a walk. These don't have to be huge, you know, explosive things that you implement. They're just little tiny things that allow you to understand that you do have control.
Beautiful. And that I love the fact that you've spoken about it's the small things, because they all do add up, but you have to start small. I think everyone thinks when they go through a healing journey or they start to notice it, it's got to be like earth shattering. There's got to be something that happens. It's got to flip everything, you know, leave your partner, or, you know, start a new career, or do something, jump out of a plane. But sometimes it's just those really small habits, as you said, going for a walk for 20 minutes. That's amazing in itself.
And
That
I
whole,
do. I think so many of us think, especially when we talk in those spiritual terms, where we're talking about, you know, awakenings. It's like it's not an earthquake that happens at 2 o'clock in the morning and you suddenly go, yeah, it is. It's those really small little messages, those intuitive feelings, those little things that keep happening that we're not listening to. And it's just about listening, and that awareness piece is huge, because once you become aware, it's when you go, okay, I can do that. And then, you know, the minute one thing works, everything else is easy. It's getting through that initial fear factor of just doing that one thing. And it's so important because, especially now, we're living to such greater ages than our mothers and our grandmothers and their grandmothers. If we get to 50, we've probably still got 40 years on the other side. Do we want to keep doing what we just did for the first 50, or do we want to take stock of it and think about how we can improve it? And sometimes, unfortunately, that could be the marriage is no longer working, the job is no longer working. And because everything is built around these human constructs of, well, you're married till death do you part, which is a human construct, it's not a spiritual construct. We don't want to let it go. But that's not what all of these experiences are for. They come to us so we can learn and evolve. And when it's time for it to go, it's better to let it go than to hang on in misery for another 40 years. And I just think some people just need to really hear that and think of, and be validated, because that's how I feel, but no one's told me that's okay to do that. It's like, of course it's okay to do that.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of, things that they've had culturally or genealogically and things like that that come
Plays
into it. But
huge part.
it is so important, as you mentioned, that even when you hit 50, it's not the end. It's not like, oh, you could live on for another 40 years. And I've heard that too, where, oh well, after 50, I'll be in the ground soon. Who cares what happens? Or I'll just deal with it until the or I'm too old to rebuild. I'm too old to leave that marriage.
Never.
Too old to start that new career, or should I do it? And as you mentioned, we are living so much more than our previous generations. Why not do something worthwhile that lights you on fire for those next 40 years than just continuing with the same thing and then going, oh, okay. I remember I read a book, and I think it was called Savage or something by Scott Cam, and he said, when you're on your deathbed, instead of picturing your relatives around you, what happens if you pictured the missed opportunities or the things you didn't do or the regrets you had or the time you wasted? How would you change your life now if that's what you saw instead? So it's not just because you hit an age, you're done and dusted. There is so much more to do and so much to achieve. And as you know, Michelle, from my work, if you don't do it, then you're coming back next cycle. And I don't want to be seeing you, and I'm sure Michelle doesn't want to be seeing you going, what are you doing? We did this already.
I
So,
know, and I certainly don't want to have to come back and do it again. But I can say from experience, I'm 61 in January, and I came back into all of this practice for myself probably in about 2015. So it was my 50th year, and I feel the transition was happening probably from about 48. I really started to really feel that things needed to shift. And a lot of factors play into that. I mean, I had my last child at 37, so I still had a young teenager when it started to happen for me. So all of that factors in as well, and it weighs into the decisions that we make, which aren't always the best decisions for us because we're worried about everybody else around us. But I can say from experience that I have evolved and changed myself so much since that, in that last 10 years. And if I had even sat and thought about where would I be right this minute, would I be mentoring women? Would I be having a podcast? Would I be writing articles that allow women to reflect? Would I be talking to you? That wasn't something that was even on my radar, but it's so amazing and I'm having so much fun. And my life is very easy and it does flow because I've worked with the energy. I've moved with what my human experience was for me from a soul perspective this time around. So everything's just working out. And I just think we're so conditioned to think life has to be hard and it has to be a struggle. And it's just so not correct. It's not meant to be like that. It's meant to be joyous and loving and fun. But because we fall into all of this human expectation and cultural expectation and everything that's been put onto us from a small child, we think it has to be difficult and traumatic, and it really doesn't. And that's not to say difficult and traumatic doesn't occur, but how we respond to that and knowing how to respond to it makes a whole difference.
so how do we find you and how do we stalk you? How do we decide, okay, Michelle, we come in, I want to know about my human design, my astrology, my energy, so I can start to move forward in my life in a way that feels aligned to me? How do I find you?
So you can find me through the Alibi Aspiring Leaders. I'm one of those, and I've got some posts happening at the moment, and I'm running a little tiny snapshot program at the moment, which you can sign up for. It's $37. It is amazing value. And what I do is I take your birth information and I give you a snapshot report of what your energy is, what you're currently sitting in, what your major transits are going to be for 2026. And I go through each of those and I let you know that, this is happening. So you may experience this in your personal life. You may experience this in your professional or your working life. This is some strategies you can implement. Here's a reflection question to sit in. And you can download that report before the end of the year. So you're ready to go into next year. And it's something that you can refer back to as the year goes on and go, okay, I'm in this transit, like from January to June. I'll get that out and I'll have another read and I'll refresh myself. So that's a tool that people can use. You can find me at michellewollaston.com and reach out to me there, DM me, stalk me, however you like. Listen to my podcast, Soul Loom, and put a comment on there. Stalk away, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm everywhere. Just Google Michelle Wollaston and it'll all come up.
Well, we'll put all your links down below. And I have to say, I did purchase your snapshot reading and I have briefly read over it, and I'm excited for next year. And it motivated me in what I was currently doing now, because I felt at the end of this year I had hit a brick wall and I was unsure which way to travel with certain things, because I had felt like I was continually hitting brick walls. So from the snapshot, and I haven't read it thoroughly, but I am planning to sit down and have like a proper cup of tea and actually go through it and make some plans. It did help me end one chapter and then look forward to a new chapter that I was going to go, so that I'm not going to consistently bump my head. But also I did see a message from you that you can buy it as a gift voucher. So
I have, yep.
I plan to buy it for the people, the admin people behind the scenes of Alibi, because I think it will be beneficial for them to have this. So if there is a gift that you're like, I'm not sure what to get that person, I'm not sure, think that person seems a bit lost or stressed and they don't know where to look for assistance, this is a beautiful snapshot for them to get started. Because as Michelle mentioned, awareness is so important. Because you can't change anything if you don't become aware of what's happening. And becoming aware of how you work energetically and what is around, as you said, your natal chart and your human design, is a beautiful way to start to bring that awareness into someone's life that they were not aware of. So, and for $37, it's an absolute steal. I'm going to be honest with you, because it was a long report. Like, that's why I need to sit down with a cup of tea and go through it.
It actually even surprised me when I started putting it together. I think I originally said it was a 2 to 3 page report. It was like, oh my heavens, this is like 20 pages. Yes. I mean, admittedly, it is a PDF and it's in fairly big font so everybody can read it. But yeah, it is. And I mean, if you have to do it properly, because it's energy and people need to understand. And I try to take a lot of that jargon and stuff out of it so people can read it and they go, okay, I get it. But 2025, like if you look at numerology, we are in a 9-year. So we're coming out of a 9-year cycle, and this is why 2025 for many of us is feeling really like, whoa, this has been a hard year, and it's been a hard few years, because we're at a point now where we're closing a lot of things out. So if you're feeling like that's happening, that's why it's happening. And then 2026, and in the Chinese philosophy, we're coming out of the wood snake and we're going into the horse. So we're galloping forward, and 2026 is a 1 year. So if you're feeling like things are ramping up and you can feel that things could be starting next year, it's because that's what's meant to happen. So if you can't let things go now and understand that you don't want to be carrying that into next year, if you're a businesswoman and you're doing business plans and you're planting seeds and you're visioning projects, you don't want to be carrying any of this mess in with you. You want to be able to let as much go as you can. And even if that's not something you can do in the next 6 weeks, being aware of what it is and where to position it and where to put it in your list of priorities is huge. So that's available. It's on the Alibi Facebook page if you want to find it, or just reach out and DM me and I can send you the links to purchase it, and I can get them to you within like 48 hours, unless I suddenly get 1,000 reports from this point on. But you will definitely have it before New Year's Eve.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing the incredible work that you're doing in the world. I'm going to pop all the links below so that they can come and find you, including Soul Loom podcast. So all of that will be below.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you for the congratulations again because you've left your job, left your full-time job, so that you
I
can
have.
continue this amazing work. So here's to an amazing 2026.
Wonderful. Thank you.